Okay, perfect. So thank you everyone so much for joining us this evening. We're super excited to be hosting this event. My name is Megan Bowman. I'm an incoming resident into WashU Neurosurgery, and I was formerly the chair of events on Women in Neurosurgery MSc. And like I said, we are very excited to be hosting this event. Tonight we'll be talking about transition to residency and how to succeed as a neurosurgery intern. We have four fabulous speakers with us, and this event is really good for all levels of medical students, but especially for those of us that have recently matched into neurosurgery and will be starting as an intern in just a few short weeks here. Before we get started, for those of you who have attended our events or not attended our events before, I encourage you to sign up for our WINS roster. On the left side of the screen, we have our medical student one. And then for those of you who have recently matched and will be becoming neurosurgery residents, we have our resident QR code on the right side of the screen. This is just a great opportunity to stay up to date with all that the Women in Neurosurgery group has to do, including different events, different offerings. So definitely encourage you to do that. To go through the format of our event, so following this brief welcome and introduction, I will be introducing our panelists. This will then be followed by pre-written questions, 4 questions that our panelists will address. After that, we will open it up to the audience to address their questions, and then finally, we will be closing the event. And so as questions come up throughout the event, please directly message them to Guadamala Calendar, who is she should have the WINS background similar to mine. So just send her a direct message and then we'll be sure to get to them during the audience Q&A. And now it is my pleasure to address and introduce our 4 panelists here. So starting off, Dr. Hannah Weiss is a PGY5 neurosurgery resident at New York University. She completed her undergraduate education and medical school education at Northwestern University. While in medical school, Dr. Weiss took an additional year to dedicate to research where she worked on quality improvement and patient outcome projects, in addition to applications of innovative technology to improve understanding of neurosurgical diseases, anatomy, and access to care. She has a strong interest in global surgery and expanding access to neurosurgical care in low-income countries. Our second speaker, Dr. Shivani Basiwala, is a PGY4 neurosurgery resident at UCLA. She completed both her Bachelor of Science in Bioengineering and her Master's in Management Science and Engineering degrees at Stanford University. She received her MD from Northwestern University. Dr. Basiwala currently has research interests in studying molecular mechanisms and biological pathways that promote glioblastoma recurrence and received a T32 grant towards her research endeavors. Dr. Giovanna Trax is a PGY1 neurosurgery resident at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. She received her undergraduate degree at Boston University in hospitality administration with minors in dance and business administration. She worked in hotel finance before transitioning to medicine. She completed her medical school education at Eastern Virginia Medical School, where she received AOA and was awarded the American Brain Tumor Association Research Fellowship. Dr. Trax's clinical interests include spinal oncology, spinal deformity, and neuro-oncology. And then finally, Dr. Debbie Banja is a PGY1 neurosurgery resident at New York University. She graduated from Carnegie Mellon University with university honors in neurobiology and biomedical engineering. She received her MD from Penn State College of Medicine, where she earned AOA. She has received NIH funding, including a TL1 research training grant, and she helped secure a small business innovation research grant. Her research interests focus on discovering novel therapeutics for brain tumors, including photodynamic therapy for glioblastoma and immunotherapy for brain metastases. And so thank you so much to our 4 wonderful speakers for being here. We're so lucky to have you, and we're so excited to learn from you all. And so with that, I will move on to our first questions. And so the way we've decided, or sorry, the way that we split apart these questions is one's dedicated towards our junior residents and then one's dedicated towards our senior residents, so that we're able to get the perspective from all levels of training. And so my first question I'm going to pose to our junior residents, and so that is, what advice do you have for preparing to start intern year? And what are some good resources to study from during intern year? Either Giovanna or Debbie, whoever would like to start first.
I'll start. So hi everyone, I'm Giovanna, I'm at UAB. Uh, First and foremost, take some time for yourself. You do not want to burn yourself out studying or, trying to get everything together to such a high extent that you don't hit the ground running once you get there for intern year. But I do recommend you starting to touch base with the research groups that you wanted to get involved with, because then you could get things done like IRB training, animal research training, or anything that you have to do so that when you start intern year, you're not trying to go to those. And then also, in terms of resources for studying, I kept a Google Doc and I organized it by rotation. And then anytime I found a learning, I would just throw it in there. And then when I, had to re-encounter it, I could just Command F in a Google Doc, either from my laptop or from my phone. So I found that really helpful. And then also, if you haven't already downloaded the Dura deck on Anki, if you were an Anki user in medical school, the Dura deck, and then also Roten's neurosurgical anatomy. He has like 100 cards, and you will end up having to take the neuroanatomy exam to even sit for the ABNS. So it's great to just start preparing in terms of like neuroanatomy, and then also for the Google Doc, just kind of staying organized as you go through each rotation. But in terms of preparing, just, take your time and be make sure you're, taking care of yourself and, getting organized in terms of moving and maybe go on a vacation instead of stressing too much about pre-studying.
Yeah, I completely agree. I I would say like the best thing for you to do is to get everything of your life set up and organized, because the time for those kinds of things like doctor's appointments and like Giovanna said, like different meetings, like you just don't have a lot of like built-in time for that. So I would definitely get all of that organized. But it is, and there's very little you can do to prepare for intern year. You can, know everything, like, and have a really good knowledge base, but there's just like the workflow, I think, and kind of getting oriented to um, kind of the steep learning curve and the amount of work that you have to do during intern year. Not to scare anyone, but it is a lot, and I think that was like kind of the biggest adjustment was from that side of things rather than really like the material or content. But something that my seniors did for me was super helpful. We met a couple of times like before we even started intern year, which is a good way just to get to know your residents, but also just be able to ask any of those like pressing questions that you have before you start, or so that they can give you an idea of what to expect. Every program is about the same, but also a little bit different. So you can kind of get a sense of what your first few months will look like, just by meeting with your seniors or even just the PGY2s. A book that I did start reading a little bit just before was the Neurosurgical Consult book from Hopkins. I think it's like a really like digestible and just like a really like easy read. They break the different cases down, and I think it's like really helpful because you'll be one of your roles will be seeing consults and just like one having a framework of what the or different consult questions or different consult types, just having that framework is super helpful, so like what information you need and like how to kind of package all of that effectively for your teams. Again, things that you'll learn during intern year, but it'll just kind of help orient your mind before you start. I also like reviewed some like anatomy on imaging. There's like better websites now, but that I'm aware of, but this is one that I used. Just like it's like a very easy, like light, and I feel like a good level for like graduating medical students, interns. They you can kind of like go through MRIs and CT scans and like it'll have like labeled anatomy, and I think that's also a big role, is being able to learn and interpret imaging when you're an intern. So those are the couple of things that I did. But like we said, there isn't too much you can do to prepare. I'm sure the further questions will be like how to like actually increase your knowledge base and study during intern year and like things like that. And I think we can talk more about that after.
Great. Thank you so much for that wonderful advice and for providing all those resources. I know that me and a lot of other people on the call will definitely be looking into that right after this. So now I want to move on to our senior residents. And so kind of like looking at like, your role being through or being within neurosurgery for a couple of years now, what advice do you have for incoming interns to be prepared for the demands of residency and what's going to be expected of them as interns? And either Hannah or Shivani?
I can start. I think advice for incoming interns to be prepared. I agree with what's been said. Like there's really no way to actually prepare for what's coming um and you can kind of start to probably drive yourself a little crazy when if you're trying to crack the code. So I would say I like the advice to just get everything in your life as in order as it I mean, we always have something on our to-do list, and mine grows each day, but get as many of those things checked off so that when July 1st or whenever you're starting rolls around, you have one focus and your energy can fully go into work, especially as you're getting in the groove. Um, Sometimes this means even like personal like relationships and things like that. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. You're entering in, fit and healthy, and you're eating well and you're in a good sleep rhythm and all that, because it's going to push you in so many different ways, and you want at least those basics already so figured out so that you can focus really on the work. I mean, I'd say like the only other thing is have the latest version of Greenberg or a version of Greenberg. That's still kind of the Bible, even though it's relatively new of neurosurgery, especially junior residency. But like, don't open it much. And no one's expecting you to know very much. Just come in with a good attitude, well rested, and I think that's the way to really be the most prepared for the thing that is impossible to prepare for.
Yeah, I think I would echo a lot of what's been said already, but I think the one thing is like I wouldn't worry so much about like trying to prepare because like everyone said it's impossible, but more so just like try to remember that it's going to be okay. Like you don't need to prepare. You've done all these things to get here. You've done your sub-Is, you've like gone through this whole application process, and like you do know the things that you need to know, even though it might feel like it's a whole new thing and you don't know how to do anything. You've been there, you've done the sub-Is, you like know how this works, and like every hospital is pretty similar, even if you like didn't go to that hospital in your sub-Is and stuff. I think the other thing, like other people have said, is like it is very, very tiring and you want to go all in when you start. And so, and everything kind of hits a little bit harder when you're tired. I think that was the part that for me was the hardest, was like people, might be upset with you because you're learning, you don't know exactly what you're doing at first. And then you're very, very tired because it's all new and you're working all the time and everything just kind of seems harder than it is. And so, I think it's helpful before you start to just figure out like what are the things that help you preserve your sanity? What is it that you enjoy? What is it that like will help you kind of recharge after these things happen? And make sure you like are putting aside some time for that as you go through, especially through intern year.
Great, thank you so much. So it sounds like there's kind of a lot of that mental aspect, like multiple people have said, being well rested, kind of being able to have that good attitude of going into intern year and preparing for something that you can't prepare for fully. So now going back to our junior residents. So our third question is, what are your best junior resident hacks? And we've kind of left this a little bit broad on purpose. So whether that's related to maintaining fitness, hobbies and routines, any sort of tips or tricks that you learned on call, how you were able to optimize efficiency, I guess kind of like what stood out in your mind as like those hacks that you really learned during your intern year.
I'll start with this. My now chief resident gave incredible advice before we started. And he said that do your best to try to stay out of survival mode and keep yourself mentally in thrive mode. So survival mode is like, sometimes it's necessary. Like you did a 24-hour shift and you're really just kind of like trying to, get through that next morning, maybe a morning report, trying to get through that next morning so you go home and sleep. So sometimes you're forced into that survival mode, but on a day to day, you don't want to be in that mode. You want to be in that thrive mode, in that how can I spend those, 5 extra minutes just reading a bit more, kind of keeping that not competitive edge, but that edge that got you interested in neurosurgery in the first place. For me, if I wake up and if I put mascara on, I feel like I'm not just in survival mode, I'm thriving. So like, whatever personal care thing that you like to do in the morning, do that, because it's like, oh no, I'm still myself. I'm still doing XYZ. Whereas when you're really thrown into survival mode, you're choosing between, okay, am I gonna eat or sleep? Try to keep yourself out of that survival mode. So that's the biggest piece of advice I have for like maintaining my sanity. And then when you're also in that like thrive mode, you'll be more likely to contribute to your hobbies and things like that.
I love that. I'm gonna start implementing the thrive mode. Um, yeah, it's like funny to answer some of these questions because I don't think I've figured out anything yet, but things that definitely like some of the biggest advice that I have is like you you want to be consistent and be organized as much as possible. So if you can figure out how to do like if you're on neurosurgery and you're the service intern and you're running the whole show is like essentially like the floor and things like that. You want to be able to have a workflow that you are able to do every single day the same way as much as you can. Because the day gets so crazy and things come up, consults, procedures, different emergencies, and things can get lost if you're not, if you're not able to kind of go into um, just like a rhythm of like your daily tasks. So, for us, it's like, oh, we see all of our patients, we, take out all of the drains or things like that. We write all the notes, then we put in all the orders, like everything like could like in a stepwise fashion so that your all of your like responsibilities that need to be done just get done as efficiently as possible. And then you have like you're ahead for anything that will come up. And that's the goal is to just always be ahead. You you want to be like, I don't know, for me, I try to have everything done by a certain time so that like even if I do kind of don't meet that time mark, I know like where I am in my day, of like, okay, that all of these things should have been done by this point because now I need to use the rest of my day for all of these other things. So like I think being able to do everything the same way each day will just also like lower a lot of the cognitive load of the workflow. And I also think that like helps a lot with just that mindset helps a lot with being in the OR as well. Like if you can just go into like autopilot for a lot of things that are like suturing, if you're able to do the same thing, like same technique every time when you're running like the deep dermals or things like that, like just having that consistency so that you don't have that cognitive load constantly. I think the other thing is like you need to figure out how to be organized. So like think of your way of keeping track of everything. You're going to get a bunch of consults, phone calls, random things from clinic that you'll have to deal with. Like, and if you miss those things, unfortunately, it's like that the patient is at like suffers and then also the team. So like you really need to make sure that you're keeping track of everything and you have a good system for that. So whether it's post-it notes or like a little notebook where you write everything down, or things like that, I would just try to think of a way that you'll stay organized and have all of the information that you need every day. I was not very good at maintaining fitness, but I think in the latter half of intern year, I started being better at that. And I think just set low goals for yourself. Like if fitness is something that's really important for me. And I think like for someone that was working out and being active like most days of the week, like, and then going to not being doing that at all, it's like you're like, oh, I should. In my head, I'm like, oh, I really want to be like, working out or being active like this many times a week. Um, Having those expectations from before residency are just not going to play true during intern years. So I would just set low goals. Like if it's like I just want to be active one day of the week, then you can like that's something that's like very attainable, and like you'll realize that you can actually fit that into your schedule, and then it'll just become something that like just naturally can fit in, after work or things like that. So I'd just be like easy on yourself, and you know just have low goals for those kinds of things. Um, and then I'd also just like again just trying to put your life in routine as much as possible, including incorporating like the personal aspects. So if it's like you're on your way home, if you like are able to like call family members or your parents or things like loved ones, if you can just like make that a routine of like, okay, like this is my 15 minutes on my way home, I'm just gonna like make a phone call to someone. That's like a good way to kind of like balance some of the personal things with the work. And then I think just know that like all of your time during the day like can be used to be efficient and if like to get stuff done. So, for us, like going from our call room to the ED takes, some time. You can be using the elevator time to like review charts or, like prep the text that you're going to send to your senior as you're on your way down to the consult. Like using all of your time is going to be really important. So, those are just like a few things. There's probably more, but just off the top of my head.
This is amazing advice for just off the top of your head for both of you, especially with a very broad question. But I really appreciate you talking about kind of like the optimizing the efficiency, using all the minutes that you can, but then also to having, I think, those realistic goals and then also not getting into survival mode and trying to keep yourself as grounded as possible. So that's very helpful to hear. Thank you so much. And so before we move on to our final question, just a reminder that our Q&A section is coming up after this. So please start sending in your questions to, again, Guadalmala Calendar is the name you want to be sending those to. And in the meantime, I've got our final question for our senior residents. And so that is, what makes a standout intern or junior resident? Throughout your years of training, what sort of qualities, characteristics, and traits have you noticed that really make these people great and special?
I can start with this one. So I can just give a couple pieces of advice. I'm just like starting to be a senior, so I'm definitely not like chief or anything, but these are the things I've noticed that, make people successful. So one thing that I was told when I was a junior resident is like, you never want to make the same mistake twice. So no one cares if you don't really know anything when you start. Like your seniors are there to support you. They want to help you. They understand that like you're not going to come in knowing everything. But I think people want that if they explain something to you once or go over something once, that they don't see you do that thing over and over again. The second thing I got told a lot was just like attitude and like if you can show up and have a good attitude, even though you're tired and like you're overworked and you're doing all the scut work for the whole service, and like at some point you're gonna be like, I hate this and I don't want to do it anymore. I want to like be in the OR and I, don't want to put in orders and do the list and discharges and whatever. But that is your job for the first year or two at most places. And I think if you can come into it with a good attitude and like really take initiative and know what needs to happen without anyone telling you, that goes a really long way towards people liking you and like wanting to support you and the attendings noticing that like everything, like when you're on, everything is done and everything is good. And then I think even though it doesn't seem that important, it does play into how people treat you and interact with you later because it is a very small world. It's a small department. Like everyone kind of knows each other and everyone talks about like how things are going, what's happening. And so that's helpful. And then related to that, like being reliable. So if you say that you did something or you will do something, people should be able to trust that that's true. They shouldn't need to like go double check or make sure it happens. Um, they should be able to say like, oh, my junior told me this is done. So like I can trust it's done. I can tell my attending it's done without being worried that I'm going to get into trouble for like lying or saying the wrong thing. And then the last thing I got told a lot is like, be nice to the nurses, make friends with the nurses. Don't ever like let yourself get in a situation where you're like combative or arguing or doing anything weird with the nurses, like especially when you're starting, like listen to them. They know more than you do for most things, and they can like help guide you the right way. But balance that with like if something they're saying doesn't make sense to you, like ask someone else. They often do know the right thing, but sometimes I think they can also lead you a little astray. Um, and do not gossip. I think we all love to gossip. I love to gossip, but it will get you in trouble in residency. And so just like be careful about that and about what you're saying, because it gets passed around more than you would think. But yeah.
Yes, that's a great one. Geez, all the great advice from everyone has already kind of been said. I'm going to repeat them. I wrote down 6 things that I think make a top-notch junior resident. And unfortunately, I think it's a combo of all of these things. You can't just be like really good at like 2 of them and then gossip or something like that. So, but like I said, it's a lot of repeats, but just going it through my little list really quickly. Being so a good intern is there early. Take the time your chief said to be there and subtract, like get there 15 minutes early. You always need that extra time. It won't be enough time. You will wish, geez, I wish I would have showed up 20 minutes early. So always come early. And like Debbie said, figure out your system for how to be organized. For me, I got this great Japanese $10 color pen on Amazon, and I bought it over and over again as I lost it throughout all of junior residency. And I had pink represented to-dos, green represented updates for my chief, blue represented like other little tasks I had to do, and I had check boxes. Whatever works for you, just stay very organized and keep your, tweaking your system. And once you figure out your system, use it. My second thing, work ethic. There is no task too small for an intern. This is something that even like never have the thought, geez, the med student should do this. Like, no, it's your job. Walk the patient, get the patient out of bed. If you want the nurse to get the patient out of bed and they're not doing it, you go help. Like anything like that. The smallest little task that you are physically capable of doing is your job, unless you have someone on your team who's excited and willing to do it for you. Own your patients like they're your own patients, and think about them in your head as my patients, not as like, oh, my team or my attendings. The third thing I would say is communication. I was told something by one of my chiefs. You want to communicate everything to the point where your chief says, please, you don't need to tell me that. That's when you know, oh, I've hit a good amount, especially in the beginning, because you only get in trouble for the things you don't report. That's not really true. You can get in trouble for other things, but like that's when you really get in trouble. Is like, oh, why didn't you call me? So I think it's good to just keep calling, and then if you hear the feedback that you know what, you're doing great, but like you're calling me a little bit much, then you back off. But in the beginning, just communicate as much as you can. Fourth thing I would say is humility. Sorry, I've got my baby in the background. Humility. Treat everyone respectfully and admit when you make a mistake. We all make mistakes. The beauty of being an intern is you, like I said, you're kind of expected to know nothing. So ask questions. This is the time to ask the stupid questions. Ask away. Put your ego aside. You should have no major ego as an intern and just ask questions. If you don't understand why are we doing this or what, or did you really mean this, just ask and ask for feedback. Like after surgeries, after a rotation, I would like always ask my attendings, can you sit down for a couple minutes next week? I just want to hear, how do you think I'm doing? What could I have done better during this rotation so I could have done more in the OR, things like that. It really like gets the message across that you really super care. And I think that just really helps. And then fifth thing I wrote down is eager to learn. So be reading with your abundant free time, reading, studying, prepping for the OR, writing up a little text message or an email saying, here's what I think we're going to do in the case, things like that, that show that you're really invested in learning. And then the sixth thing is just emotional intelligence and grit. I think the best junior residents are the ones that are clearly supporting their other co-interns and that contribute to a positive team dynamic, and that they're going to have really tough days, but then they're coming back the next day, they fully bounce back and they're staying calm under pressure. The pressure inevitably will get worse and things are going to get stressful, but I think like the best junior residents find it within them that they can remain calm and they can just work harder, put their head down. Those are the ones that I think people are always like, wow, they're doing well. Even if inside you're crumbling a little bit, hold it together and work hard, especially for women in neurosurgery coming into with a little bit of confidence and reminding yourself you can absolutely do this just as much as your male co-resident can do it. And you know, don't let that seep in or get in your mind at all.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all this wonderful advice from all four of you, and especially for the summary at the end. I think that just perfectly highlighted everything that everyone was saying as to kind of those, characteristics and traits that all of us should be striving for.